Okay, so today we are going to read chapter 16, The Singing Tree, and chapter 17, In the Course of a Lifetime. So, as we read together today, I want you to think about how people's own agendas, so what they have planned to do, interfere with their understanding of how others feel. All right, so The Singing Tree. Graham was released from the hospital the next morning, mainly because she was so ornery. Gramps wanted her to stay another day, but Graham climbed out of bed and said, "Where's my underwear?" "I guess this cantankerous woman is getting out of here," Gramps said. I think fear made us all a little cantankerous. I had spent the night in the waiting room. Gramps offered to get me a motel room, but I was afraid that if I left the hospital, I would never see Graham again. The boy we had met at the river curled up in an armchair, but I don't think he slept either. Once he used the telephone. I heard him say, "Yeah, I'll be home in the morning. I'm with some friends." The boy woke me up at 6 o'clock and said Graham was much better. He handed me a piece of paper. "It's my address, in case you ever want to write or anything. But I understand if you didn't." I opened the paper. "What's your name?" He smiled. "Oh, yeah, right." He took the paper and added his name. "Tom Fleet." "See ya," he said. As we were checking out of the hospital, I asked if we should call my father. Graham said, "Well, now, Chickabiddy, I thought about that, but it's only going to make him worry. Do you think we could wait to call him when we get to Idaho?" Gramps was right, but I was disappointed. I was ready to call my father. I wanted very much to hear his voice, but I was also afraid that I might ask him to come and get me. Outside the hospital, I heard the warbling of a bird, and it was such a familiar warble that I stopped and listened for its source. Bordering the parking lot was a rim of poplars. The sound was coming from somewhere in the top of those trees, and I thought instantly of the singing tree in Bybanks. Next to my favorite sugar maple tree, beside the barn, was a tall aspen. When I was younger, I heard the most beautiful bird song coming from the top of that tree. It was not a call. It was a true bird song, with trills and warbles. I stood beneath that tree for the longest time, hoping to catch sight of the bird that was singing such a song. I saw no bird, only leaves waving in the breeze. The longer I stared up at the leaves, the more it seemed that it was the tree itself that was singing. Every time I passed that tree, I listened. Sometimes it sang, sometimes it did not. But from then on, I always called it the singing tree. The morning after my father learned that my mother was not coming back, he left for Lewiston, Idaho. Graham and Gramps came to stay with me. I had pleaded to go along, but my father said he didn't think I should have to go there through that. That day, I climbed up into the maple and watched the singing tree, waiting for it to sing. I stayed there all day and on and into the early evening. It did not sing. So, I can create a sensory image here. The text says that Sal climbed the maple tree waiting for the singing tree to sing, but it didn't. So I'm picturing a very still day where there's almost no wind, so that the tall ash didn't make a singing sound. So I'm picturing a sadness and a silence in the outside world that is reflecting what Sal feels on the inside. In the hospital parking lot, Graham heard the song too. "Oh, Salmanaka," she said, "a singing tree." She pulled at Graham's sleeve. "Oh, it's a good sign, don't you think?" As we swept on across South Dakota toward the Badlands, the whispers no longer said, "Hurry, hurry," or "Rush, rush." They now said, "Slow down, slow down." I could not figure this out. It seemed some sort of warning, but I did not have much time to think about it, as I was busy telling about Phoebe. Chapter 17, In the Course of a Lifetime. A few days after Phoebe and I had seen Mr. Berkway and Mrs. Cadaver whacking away at the rhododendron, I walked home with Phoebe after school. She was crotchety and sullen as a three-legged mule, and I was not quite sure why. She had been asking me why I had not said anything to my father about Mrs. Cadaver and Mr. Birkway, and I told her that I was waiting for the right time. Your father was over there yesterday, Phoebe said. I saw him. He better watch out. What would you do if Mrs. Cadaver chopped up your father? Would you go live with your mother? It surprised me when she said that, reminding me that I had told Phoebe about my mother. Yes, I suppose I would go live with her. That was impossible, and I knew it, but for some reason I could not tell Phoebe that, so I lied. Phoebe's mother was sitting at the kitchen table when we walked in. In front of her was a pan of burned brownies. She blew her nose. "Oh, sweetie," she said, "you startled me. How was it?" "How was what?" Phoebe said. "Why, sweetie, school, of course. How was it? How were your classes?" "Okay." "Just okay?" Mrs. Winterbottom suddenly leaned over and kissed Phoebe's cheek. "I'm not a baby, you know," Phoebe said, wiping off the kiss. Mrs. Winterbottom stabbed the brownies with a knife. "Want one?" she asked. "They're burned," Phoebe said. "Besides, I'm too fat." "Oh, sweetie, you're not fat," Mrs. Winterbottom said. "I am." "No, you're not." "I am," Phoebe shouted at her mother. "You don't have to bake things for me. I'm too fat, and you don't have to wait here for me to come home. I'm 13 now." Phoebe marched upstairs. Mrs. Winterbottom offered me a brownie, so I sat down at the table. What I started doing was remembering the day before my mother left. I did not know it was to be her last day home. Several times that day, my mother asked me if I wanted to walk up in the fields with her. It was drizzling outside, and I was cleaning out my desk, and I just did not feel like going. Maybe later, I kept saying. When she asked me about the 10th time, I said, "No, I don't want to go. Why do you keep asking me?" I don't know why I did that. I didn't mean anything by it, but that was one of those last memories she had of me, and I wished I could take it back. Phoebe's sister, Prudence, stormed into the house, slamming the door behind her. "I blew it. I just know it," she wailed. "Oh, sweetie," her mother said. "I did," Prudence said. I did. Mrs. Winterbottom half-heartedly chipped away at the burned brownies and asked Prudence if she would have another chance at cheerleading tryouts. "Yes, tomorrow, but I know I'm going to blow it." Her mother said, "Maybe I'll come along and watch." I could tell that Mrs. Winterbottom was trying to rise above some awful sadness she was feeling. But Prudence couldn't see that. Prudence had her own agenda, just as I had my own agenda. That day, my mother wanted me to walk with her. I couldn't see my own mother's sadness. "What?" Prudence said. "Come along and watch?" "Yes, wouldn't that be nice?" "No," Prudence said. No, you can't. It would be awful." I heard the front door open and shut, and Phoebe came into the kitchen waving a white envelope. "Guess what was on the steps," she said. Mrs. Winterbottom took the envelope and turned it over and over before she slowly unsealed it and slipped out the message. "Oh," she said. "Who is doing this?" She held out the piece of paper. "In the course of a lifetime, what does it matter?" Prudence said, "Well, I have more important things to worry about, I can assure you. I know I'm going to blow those cheerleading tryouts. I just know it." On and on she went until Phoebe said, "Cripes, Prudence, in the course of a lifetime, what does it matter?" At that moment, it was as if a switch went off in Mrs. Winterbottom's brain. She put out her hand to her mouth and stared out the window. She was invisible to Prudence and Phoebe, though. They did not notice. Phoebe said, "Are these cheerleading tryouts such a big deal? Will you even remember them in 5 years?" "Yes," Prudence said. "Yes, I most certainly will." "How about 10 years? Will you remember them in 10 years? In 10? "Yes," Prudence said. As I walked home, I thought about the message. In the course of a lifetime, what does it matter? I said it over and over. I wondered about the mysterious messenger, and I wondered about all the things in the course of a lifetime that would matter. I did not think cheerleading tryouts would matter, but I was not so sure about yelling at your mother. I was certain, however, that if your mother left, it would be something that mattered in the whole long course of your lifetime.